So this would be what it was like, right? We want to give you some best practices and some techniques to make the hybrid, which is most of our presentations are hybrid, fun and interesting and engaging for both the audiences.
So would you like me to share this to Sarah at home?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm going to actually grab the clicker.
How many folks might be
Well, it can be a lot. Okay, we have only one today, but it can, typically I've seen 5 to 8, because when you have a mix, a lot of people like to come because we like to see each other in person, but it's not unusual to have 4 or 5 people at least.
You already have some who signed up to be coming through Zoom. Class.
So, right, I should have checked this one out before. Why don't you go to the next slide? So, in the before times, it used to be really easy to hold a presentation, right? We just go into the forum, talk to everybody, you'd be prepared, no technology to work about. Everybody would listen with rapture to what you had to say. Why don't you go to the next slide?
Go ahead and try a little bit.
Okay.
It might be the distance.
Oh, okay. But then we got hit with COVID, right, which changed everything. Let's go to the next one. But one of the things that came out of it was good is that we learned we could all get together on a little glass screen and talk to each other. And by the way, I had a real crush on Marcia, so you know. Or sometimes we talked to a lot of screen names because people wouldn't turn on their cameras. Or
Try it.
Maybe point towards the pointer.
oh, there's the
Might just be.
Yeah.
Might just be your distance.
okay. Or sometimes it was better if they did turn off the camera, right? So, but let's go to the next one. The key thing is if we mastered the controls, right? There's different controls that we had, and we could do a presentation. We could have our remote participants. We learned that Zoom was an effective tool for communicating and having an engaged conversation with people remotely. Okay? So, next one. And out of that, we learned that we can hold hybrid presentations, which allows us to have a remote audience as well as an in-person audience. And the trick is, though, it's 2 different audiences. And you have to pay a little bit of attention to the fact that you have 2 remote groups. So, go to the next slide. So, the one thing we don't want you to worry about is logistics. We're going to really help with all this to make it easy. We've learned with a lot of experience, and kind of washed you out there. We'll handle the setup. Justin, if you want, will monitor the chat. He'll mute the noisy connections. You know, the person that answers the phone from somebody when they're on the other end.
Goes to the bathroom.
Or goes to the bathroom. If you have sound or video or something, right, he'll bring up that link and cue that for you and play it, and he'll handle the recording. So we record the events. So you'll coordinate with Justin ahead of time. So let's talk a little bit about the logistics. And incidentally, if you have questions, please ask. Okay? So 1 to 2 weeks before class, right, you should prepare your presentation. And you want to come and work with Justin. You'll come here and do a dry run. And it's really, right, we all prepare our presentations a little differently. It's something to get used to. We have a unique setup here at the Y. So that dry run is just really important. If you've got handouts that you want to distribute to the participants, if you can prepare them as a PDF, and you've got a technique that Justin can email them out to everybody so that all your participants will have ahead of time. You try not to print anything, right? You're trying to conserve paper. And I didn't prepare it yet, but I'm going to prepare, and we'll email out to you all a little checklist so that you actually have something that you can kind of check off. We've done the things. I'll get that out to you in about 2 days. And there's things that you have to consider, right? Your video and auto files, if they're shareable, we had a few problems with those. If you're using YouTube or something like that, it's pretty good, but if you're using one of the other video services, permissions and things, so it's good to practice those. We like to have you either put them on a thumb drive and embed it if you can. How you're going to share a presentation with Justin, whether you're going to email it to him. Yes, Lynn.
What do you mean when you say embedded?
So if you're good with PowerPoint, you can embed sound and video into a PowerPoint presentation. So if you're going to do that, if not, the best thing to do is either share it on a thumb drive or have it linked to it. Whether you're going to use PowerPoint or a PDF, and sort out who does what. Who's going to advance the slides? Like right now, Justin's advancing the slides because I can't get them to work. Who's going to monitor the chat, and how are you going to handle Q&A? So, right, you can handle Q&A at the end, or you can handle Q&A as we're going. Yes.
What is monitor chat? Does the Zoom audience ask questions, or are they asking via chat?
So you have a choice, right? You can tell them, hey, unmute yourself and ask the questions, and then it's like they're in the room, or they can type them into chat. And people that are sometimes maybe a little more reticent might prefer to type questions. Justin will monitor, and then he'll ask you at the appropriate time.
For example, Sarah, are you there? If you are, can you go ahead and ask a question so that we can see how that works? She might just be
I think we're,
listening.
I think we're having some difficulties on our
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, so the person can ask it directly from the screen, like a regular Zoom, or they can send a chat to Justin and he can ask the question for you.
I'll show you a quick example. This is the chat box right here that I just dragged up to the screen. This chat box I have open, and I'm able to look at this and see I've already sent a message to Sarah about being able to see her here. So I can respond to anybody coming in through Zoom, and they can respond to me. And that way, in the background, I can simply ask a question of the instructor for you, instead of them having to chime in with their voice if they prefer to do it that way. You know, so there's multiple ways that they can ask questions and go back and forth.
I think most people would like to ask her, but some people, that's one of the things we've found. The electronic technology has been somewhat of a neutralizer. The more verbose people tend to always get in when you're vocally, but with the chat function, more quietly, you'll get a chance to get their questions into. Yes,
Do you ask them to raise their hand, or use the raise your hand emoji?
you're leading the witness. Jody's going to talk about that.
Okay.
That's a good question. We go to so that's, before the class, and then if you go to the next slide. So the day of the program, right? You want to, just as a backup, even though you've emailed them to Justin, bring them on a thumb drive. Bring any materials you're going to use. If you have show and tell items, if you've got things you're going to demonstrate to the group, right, you want to bring those. Generally, it's good to have not too busy a shirt, so most of you look fine. The camera kind of picks up, so something that's pretty simple. Avoid a real busy printer. So I don't see anybody here that I particularly work on. Maybe Bob.
So
But
what,
Bob's always challenging.
so how is it that you can share something that's in the room so that people on Zoom can see it?
We're going to talk about it. The other thing is you do want to arrive about 30 minutes early, so that you have time to sit down with Justin, and Justin will test out the sound, the slides, the media to make sure that everything is working. And Justin, as we talked about, he's got 30 different people that he's working with. So please remind him of how you want things set up so that he doesn't have to remember 30 different ones. And then you want to take a breath, engage your two audiences, and take your time giving your presentation. One other thing that you might want to do, when you're having a Zoom and people are starting to come in, and there's that 5 minutes and people come into the room and there's 5 minutes before, having a little banter to talk about, not related to your talk so that people don't feel like you missed something, but a joke or a story. Like I like to ask people what's their favorite movie or something just to kind of engage the audience and fill that time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jody to fill you in on some of the other aspects.
Thank you, Doug. I'm Jody Rennie, and I think the reason I was asked to talk to y'all is because I started doing hybrid teaching before the pandemic. So I was in a classroom with up to 36 students, 15 on a screen, 15 in the room. And so I learned quite a bit through the School of Hard Knocks. I've had pet pigs crawl on people's laps. I looked up one day and there was a cat face with a bouffant hairdo. Well, the lady and her cat had the same color hair. I didn't know what had happened. But hopefully you'll get to experience some of those fun times. And I swear I've met every one of my students' children. But let's just talk a little bit about the slide decks before we get going too far. As we've talked about, we sound like a broken record. Please give them to Justin a little bit early. It allows him to make sure they work. I was in a class and the person chose to use Google, PowerPoint for Google, whatever that is. Google Slides. And there was a couple of little issues with it. Had he known well enough in advance, he would have been able to solve that problem for the speaker. That's why PowerPoint or PDF is preferred. You want to keep it simple. People are here to talk and to hear you. They don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time reading. We can do that at home. They want to engage with a real person. And if you have sound or videos, we talked about embedding the link. Now, that doesn't always work. Back to really good to do a dry run. I did a class on Agatha Christie. I subscribed to BritBox, for those of you that's a thing, one of my favorites. And I was pulling links off of BritBox. Well, it's a subscription. They're not going to let you embed their links. So it took a little bit to pull it off, but it added context to the class because we watched the movie like, I don't know, a minute of the movie. Suzanne, didn't you do something with sounds? Music? So those are all things that Zoom sometimes has a hard time with, but that's where that dry run can really let you add to the content of the class that you're teaching. You'll notice I like to walk around when I'm speaking and watch what's happening over here. Not that I love being on camera, but the camera is following me, so I don't have to be glued to the podium. I do want to turn occasionally over to the screen so I can see who is on the screen, and we thankfully are able to meet as a group, but that doesn't always happen. But I can be looking at the same time I look at you, I can turn and look here. And I'm also then looking at them. Or I look up and I can look at the camera. But they're engaged, they're my other audience, and I need to make sure. I always think of this as theater in the round, because we have people all the way around us. Go to the next slide, I appreciate it. Font size, Doug put this together, I thought it was adorable. 32 points seems to be around the right size. Remember, this is another key piece, you do not know what device people are using when they're watching it. I've attended Chesapeake Forum meetings on my cell phone, bouncing down the highway. Some people have tablets, some people have, use their television screen. So you don't know what device they're using, and you don't know what they're set on. When I'm having somebody share, I like to go to gallery mode. So I see the presentation, and I see everybody else in the class. But not everybody wants to do that. They may be on speaker mode. So make your print, and we'll go to the next slide. So try to make it simple and consistent. This is clearly a case where less is more. Now, if you'll show the next slide, Doug put together the sample for us, and you can see where he's got, a different font for the title, and he has the sparingly is bold and italicized, so you can use it for emphasis, but it's a pretty clear slide. If you've got a long quote, maybe you just want to read it and give them a reference, you can always, on the bottom of your slide, put a citation so that whoever it is that's listening, I make my students do this, put citations on the bottom so I can go look up those materials later. And that's really helpful because they may want to know what your source was, where you got that information from. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to park on this one for a long time. And this is the gauging both audiences. As everybody has said, our feedback shows that people join our classes because they want to interact with other people. And we don't know why they couldn't come in person. It could be a bad hair day. It could be that they're unable to travel and for any number of reasons, and therefore they want to do a hybrid class. I will tell you that you will be surprised one day when you show up and discover people you didn't think were going to be in the class are here. And people that you were pretty sure weren't going to be here are suddenly on the camera. That happened to me the whole time I was teaching. I'd be like, well, what are you doing there? So be prepared. There will be a mix-up. Another reason for preparing your media so that Justin can email it out. You don't want 50 sets of slides here and have 5 people show up because the tuition does not include a mailing fee. Yes, sir.
If you look into the camera, you're gonna have your back towards the audience.
Absolutely, and that's why I refer to it as theater in the round. Sometimes you're going to be up here and you're going to be talking to these folks, and then you turn and you talk to the folks here. So, yes, but it allows you, again, to engage both of your audiences. Yes, sir.
So, there'll be folks on via Zoom, but we're also gonna have, images of the group and ourselves.
Yes, sir.
So right now, that camera is providing those 3 different angles, those 3 images, but then other people on Zoom will also be there, but it will still maintain those boxes. It's just as more people join in, the boxes will shrink in size, but you'll still be able to see all those different angles.
What about the presentation? How will that appear?
For here,
Yep.
it'll be on the screen.
And for people who are coming in from home on their own device, what they will end up seeing is this exact screen with your presentation, and then they will see what's on this TV as well, but it will be minimized in the top right corner. So 75% of their screen will be able to see your presentation. The last 25% in the corner will be this TV screen right here.
So one of the things I would suggest is you do not, it tends to be this corner, I think that's a Zoom thing. Try not to put a lot of material here because it will be covered up with their faces, okay? So if you put the majority of your material kind of in the middle, it works a whole lot better. There's some other things that they can do as well. If we go back to the engagement part, if I'm going to ask you all a question, I want to make sure I'm asking them a question as well. So I might say, guys, I have a question for the group, all of the group. I have a question. This is what it is. I'm going to call on Zoom people first, so get ready. Now, remember, if you're on Zoom, how many of us turn off, or we've got it on, we may not be on the video, we got the dog over here, we got something else going on over here. Warn them. Guess what? And I might even say, and so Sarah, I'm going to start with you. Now Sarah has time to fumble around, everybody else fumble around, find that mute button, get that video lined up, get my thinking face on. So that gives Sarah a couple chances to get ahead. If they don't answer, and I actually teach a class in Peru where I teach to 20 black boxes for 16 hours on one weekend. They don't turn their video on. And it's not being rude, it's they don't have the bandwidth. Think about the Eastern Shore. Not everybody has internet that's able to do audio and video. So if they really want to hear the presentation, they don't have the video on. So they're there, they're attentive, but if you give them a heads up you're going to call on them, then they can choose to turn the video on or not. Again, it also helps with that fumbling mute button that we all know and love. The other thing is, you may want to turn off the screen, and you might want to show that to us, Justin. If I'm going to have a conversation with you and with them, I may say, hey, Justin, can we just minimize this? Because for the people on Zoom, this takes up most of their screen. So he'll turn that off, and now you're going to see bigger pictures of them. They're going to be able to see a bigger picture of you, and we can facilitate a discussion between the two. It's an eye rest, it's a breakup in the pattern, it keeps people on their toes. So that's something else you might want to do.
So it won't show it on these screens right here, but for instance, I just did that for the person, Sarah, who's at home. I turned off the screen share, so now her view, instead of seeing this, her view suddenly maximized to see the presenter. And then I can resume that screen share, and now, just with a couple of clicks, now it's back, and now Sarah is looking primarily at that. So that's where, again, if you're having long instances where you're not using your slides and you want people to see mainly you and listen to you, you can make a comment, whatever, and I can easily change that back and forth. So that way, you're not always being minimized in their screen.
So they'll see you, but they'll also see everybody else on Zoom and everybody else in the room. Again, that sense of engagement and that sense of belonging, which is what we're trying to emphasize. Did you want to? Okay.
Justin, would you remind us during the presentation if that should occur? Because when I'm involved in the presentation, I might simply forget that I had that option. It'd be very handy if you could suggest it to me.
And that's a really good thing good reason why you want to do that dry run, so that you can tell them. We had one person do 20 minutes where her title slide was up and there were no changes in her slides. So it was like, did you need to do that? Do you want us to take that down so people can see better? So that's a good thing to talk to Justin about ahead of time.
Some people would be insulted if you took it down. Other people would be like, oh, I'm so glad you thought of it. I mean, it's how you want to interact. But if you say, if it looks like there's a great discussion going, go ahead and take the slide down. I'll look back and see where I am, and then we'll pick up from there. So let him know how you want the flow of your presentation to go.
But what we just did, the slide stayed up for us.
And so you'll just have to go, okay, I'm ready to start again, or Justin will say, I mean, I work with technology guys on all my classes, and they'll say things like, do you want me to put that slide back on, or do you want me to share again? Great idea. And when I'm the technology person, my students will go, you're not sharing. I'm like, okay, well, let me just click this button and I'll go ahead and share. So I make it pretty well known at the beginning of my class. This brings us to another topic, which is raising hands. I do not have eyes at the back of my head. Do not tell my children or my grandchildren that. They still believe it, but I don't. So if I'm not sharing, let me know. And I say that right up front. I will make a mistake, tell me. I will not see somebody's hand on Zoom. You guys are sitting there looking at them. Tell me that there's somebody that wants to say something, because we want to make sure that they get involved. A funny story, I had a lady who had the most beautiful background. It was the cherry blossoms in DC. It was gorgeous. It was lovely to watch. The hand color she chose was the same color as the peach blossoms. She would raise her hand. I never saw it. I'm not even colorblind, and I never saw it. So you might even say, and if I don't call on you, it's because I don't see you. I want your input. Say something like, excuse me, or I'd like to make a point. And Justin will also tell you, there's somebody doing handstands over here, you might want to call on them. Again, when you call on people, sometimes you'll pose a question, and if it turns out you got a really good one, you'll have 6 people on Zoom that want to answer. The order that you see them on the screen is not the order that they see them on screen. So what I will do is I will say, wow, great, a lot of people want to respond. I'm going to start with John, then I'm going to go to Sally, and then I'm going to go to Sam. And now John, Sally, and Sam know that they're next up. I'm giving them an opportunity. When I get to, before I call on Sally to get her answer, go, hey, Sally, hang on a second. Next, I'm going to go to Jose, and I'm going to go to Ingrid, and I'm going to go to so-and-so. And then those next 3 are queued up to give their answers. So they have a fighting chance of A, remembering what they were going to say, and B, knowing who's next. We don't want to surprise anybody. It also makes everyone else perk up and decide if they really want to add context.
So how do you weave the people in your in-person audience into that?
Okay, so what I have done sometimes is said, I'm going to go to Zoom first. Anybody have any comments? My 3 people do, and I'll take those. Or I may say, I'm going to alternate. So first up on Zoom is Sam, and then I'm going to say, Martin, you're up next, and then we're going to go to Zandy, is that right? To Zandy, and now we're going to go back to Sue on screen. It's a little bit like, the auctioneer and let's make a deal, but if we can keep going back and forth, we've now created a community within the classroom, and we're not all Zoom, all classroom. So you can do it that way. Calling on people, you can do it, but you need to be a little bit polite. Sometimes they're very quiet and they don't come to class because they're very introverted and they just want to hear. They have no desire to interact. I've never had that
something,
problem.
if you don't mind me saying something too, that is something that happens very often where we have people who, the instructors here in the room, they see someone at home signed in, and they will call on that person to give a response. And if they wait for a moment, they don't hear anything, they might repeat and they'll say, so-and-so, are you there? Can you hear me? And there's nothing. There's this awkward pause. They try it again. They try it again. And it kind of becomes this issue of, oh my goodness, the person could be using the bathroom. The person could be out walking their dog. The person may not be comfortable with Zoom and may not know how to unmute themselves and they're at home frantically trying.
Share video.
If you don't get a response fairly quickly from someone on Zoom, again, you can certainly wait, take a pause, whatever it might be. But I would not try to repeatedly say to the same person, you know, I'm not going to move on until I get a response from you, because you will have those times where it's just going to stay quiet. You're not going to get a response from someone at home.
So I usually give them a couple of moments, fiddle around with like, where's that unmute button, da 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 da. And if not, I'll go, okay, you know, we're going to move on, but I'd like to come back to you. If you go back and you get the same thing, you go, okay, they're not in a place or space where they want to answer.
Is it worth, Justin sending them a chat?
He can send it, he can, but if they're fumbling because, to his point, they don't know Zoom very well, trust me, the chat's the last thing they're going to figure out. So they're not necessarily going to see it, or if they do, suddenly it's going to flash up in front of them and they're not going to know what to do. But you can try all those things. If it's a multi-series class, you might want to reach out to somebody and say, hey, you know, I saw you in class, love your input. If you get no response, the answer is they don't want to. So, and they're not going to, so move on.
What about some instructors like to do introductions? Now, beware, that can take up almost your whole class. They have to be very brief, but that might be another way of engaging.
It is. It could be a way to engage is to have them do introductions. If you've got a class of 4, it's cool. If you've got a class of 20, you just used up your first 15 minutes.
I've seen that issue before where everyone went around, said their name and why they're here. And it was even a group of maybe 6 or 7, but you got that one individual who wanted to tell an entire life story of what led them to this point. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, the people who paid to be here, they're just listening to this person give this story that,
Right.
to be honest, it's like everyone in the room is thinking, move on. So we need to have music like the Oscars. It's one that's on and you start cranking up the music or something. But yes, so you have to be very careful
You
about
want them to land the plane.
that.
John, do you do that in your poetry class? Do you do introductions?
Yes,
And how do you control that?
very brief. You know, I make it clear beforehand.
Yeah, I usually find somebody to start that I know can be very brief. And then that way it kind of sets the pattern and everyone else follows it.
So back to the engaging thing, and someone mentioned earlier about making sure that people have a time to engage. You can, and this happened to me, I walked into a class I was very excited to be taking here, and the woman was already into the dialogue of the topic, and I thought I had missed it. And I didn't, so I spent, this is really silly of me, but I spent the first 3 minutes internally fuming about, but what if that's content I wanted? What if I really wanted, why did they start early? Well, it happened, somebody asked her a question, and rather than saying, you know what, that's a great question, let's wait till everybody gets here. So my next point, people show up on Zoom, they can be a couple minutes late, I think you mentioned it. Parking between YMCA classes changing is a challenging experience. If you don't get here because the class ends at 9 and they're out at 9:05 or whatever it is. So be aware, your students may not get that premier parking spot. So I would give a 5 minutes grace. If you want to do an icebreaker, and we'll talk about a way you can do that on Zoom so that they are all heard. But if in the back of your mind you keep, they're here for the content, but they're here to be with people. And that's important for them. And as we get into the colder months, and let's face it, a lot of our clientele is older. We're all really young in this room, I know that. But some of our clientele is a little bit older, and this is their chance to be out and about without being out and about if they have to do it from Zoom. So think that. The raised hand, I told you that one. Check in with your audience. So after the first couple, yes, ma'am.
Step back, because I thought that in most classes we do a round of introductions.
It's up to you to monitor. You know what I've done? I'll actually have, this is what I'd like to know in 1 minute. Your name and what you hope to get out of this class. Or I will say, if I have 36 students, I want to do a round of introductions. We all want to know who you are. Oh, by the way, do not count on this name being who is here. I have had people, and I'm looking at that person going, there is no way that is Mrs. Wilson. because she needs a shave. That is just not Mrs. Wilson. Well, they borrow somebody else's computer or whatever, and it's set up with their name. So don't count on that. But I have said, guys, we have 5 minutes to get the introductions done, but I do want to know who you are, and I do want to know one thing you want to get out of this class. And if somebody starts to go on, I have been known to interrupt. I've been known to say, yes, Bob, I'm going to interrupt. What?
Ted Koppel.
Ted Koppel. What is he?
People.
Just cut, no, I've done it. I said, oh, thanks so much, but we're gonna move on.
Everyone that's live is wearing a name tag.
No, if you want name tags for in classroom, then you need to make provisions for name tags.
But we see the names on the screen.
You see what is printed on the screen. So when somebody logs in, it asks for their name. They could put Snuggy Uggums on as their name, and it's pretty confident that's not their name. They get to choose the name, you do not.
But there's the option not to see your name.
You probably
Your
can.
name doesn't have to.
You wouldn't believe some of the names that middle schoolers come up with when they were doing hybrid in the school system.
No, yeah.
Yes, Suzanne.
For people in the room, these name tags will be available inside the cabinet there.
Okay, so Justin will have access to the name tags to hand them out if you want to use name
For,
tags.
for a very small class, I think name tags work fine. If it's a very large class, then it can become a bit of an ordeal to try to get, let's say, 35 people all a name tag, because there's not going to be multiple testing forum staff members.
And you might
assisting
not
with
be
that.
able to read it anyway when you're standing up here.
Right, and you could, the names on the screen will be handed to say names, but
Yes.
here you can point.
Yes, here you can point. And I've actually been known to say, I am terrible at pronouncing people's names. It's horrible, it's embarrassing. It is a character flaw, and I say that. And I will have said, okay, I'm going to try your name, but you're wearing a pink shirt and whatever, and they'll like wave their hand and go, yes, thank you very much, because I don't want to, the poor lady from Pakistan, oh, it was terrible. Yes,
At the beginning of every class I teach, I always tell them that I want comments and questions, but they have to be succinct, and that I will cut you off, and I don't mean to be rude, but that's just the way it is.
excellent way to approach it, excellent way, because you will get people who have to start at the beginning of time and work forward. And I feel like I'm doing that. You might want to check in with your audience. Can you hear me? Is the pace right? Justin is great at talking to people going, my volume's not working. Well, turn up the volume on your computer. But he's really good at doing that. He will handle that offline. You will not even know that it is happening. You also might go in the midsection of it, turn off the power presentation. Are there any questions, observations, comments? What else can, are we moving at a pace that's acceptable to you? Somebody might go, yeah, but I really want to go back and discuss X, Y, Z. If it's okay with you, and that's how I run my academic classes, if you want to go down that rabbit trail and it's pertinent to the topic, down we go, and we'll eventually get back and figure out what the curriculum said I had to teach.
I have a feeling there are a lot of questions, or is it hard to predict?
It's hard to predict.
It's very hard to predict.
We have 25 people.
If you're going to have 25, okay, hold that thought, because I have an option for you. If you are brave enough to take that option on, I have an option for you.
I really like that you mentioned at the top here, repeat questions from the audience.
Yes, not everybody's hearing is great, and although we've gotten much better with the microphones, not only that, but it's that old trick of giving you 30 seconds to think of the answer. So you can repeat the question, and you know your Zoom participants can hear it. By the way, someone in the room may have been distracted. They missed the question, so that's an excellent one. What else do we want to talk about? Raise hands, using the chat, look at the camera occasionally, turn off PowerPoint, and check in with your audience. The other one was, next slide, please.
There was another point. When you talked about simplifying your PowerPoint, I have seen instructors who write a book on their PowerPoint, and it tricks you into reading your PowerPoint. So you want to just have very short bullets that keep you on track.
Right.
I've been guilty of that.
So, on this slide, if I've taken time to look at my fear of the round thing, just like if I look at some of you and I can go, that person really has a question, but they're not gonna ask it because they're afraid to. If I look at this gentleman, I can go, he's either really pondering it, something horrible is happening in the room, or I should say, hey, there's no name there, but let's name him John. Hey, John, do you have a question? You notice this lady's figured out where the emoji is. Not everybody knows where the hand raise emoji is. So she's not, but this lady's waving her hand. She's giving you two ones. But I would say, if the screen came up, hopefully somebody in the room would say, hey, Jody, there appear to be some questions on Zoom. Thank you. Or when I dry run with Justin, I'll go, Justin, I'm gonna miss it. Tell me that somebody has a question, please, because I wanna know. All right, next slide. Show and tell, we talked about that briefly. Show and tell, the camera is great. Does put on 10 pounds, I swear. But the camera we have is great, and that's fantastic. But I was in a class on Zoom where somebody showed a poster. I couldn't see what the poster said. Now, she did a very good job because she said, here it says, it was a health something. Here you do this, and then our next thing is this, our next thing. So I got the content, but if you're going to show artifacts, take a picture of them. Of the artifact, no, this
This is what instructors tend to do.
Yeah, and it doesn't always work. It does not always work. So make sure that you have a picture of your artifact so that your Zoom participant. And remember, you are sending out the PowerPoint, typically, electronically, to everyone. So if I attended your class and 6 months from now, what was it they said about such and such? I'd really like to know more about that. Then they can go back and see it as a reference. And again, electronics handouts, because we are not going to mail the handouts to the people who do not attend in person.
So those handouts go into our Google Drive. And in that Google Drive, it is set up to when Justin sends out the reminder, he will have the link for the Google Drive so that the people can just click on that link and it will go right to the document. So this worked out really slick. We tested it last semester. No problems. People could use it whether they're on a Mac or on Windows.
Okay, that's good to know. And then, so that's all that I had. Just make sure, next slide. Thumb drive, just remember to bring it with you. Doug's got a sample. Make sure you bring it with you because we all know stuff happens. And it's great if you have the backup here and Justin has access to it. And then finally, group discussions. All right. So if you've got 30 people in the room, and I go back to adults learn best by talking and doing themselves, right? They don't do best being lectured to. So if we had time, I would break you into groups, a group, and I would 2 or 3 groups and say, so what's the one thing you took away from the presentation that Doug and I have done? And you would talk amongst yourselves, you would reinforce all the things that you had learned. The people on Zoom, I would ask Justin to put them into a breakout room. You don't have to do anything snazzy. He does all the schnaz. So he will break them into, I would assume, no more than 3, 4 people in a breakout room, maybe 5 if you have to. And I would break them out into a room. They, from the screen, they disappear into this world of breakout rooms, and they can only see each other. And they can have a conversation, and then Justin hits a button, they all come magically back again. And then you have them, and you've set up ahead of time, have one person report out what were the 3 things that you took away that they were most important. You've now given them time to talk as a small group. Again, that's why 4, if you only give them 10 minutes, they can express their ideas, they can summarize their ideas, they figure out who's going to get the feedback. And they can come back and they can tell you what they learned. Or you can do it for anything. What questions do you have? You can do your introductions that way. If you wanted to break people into groups and say everybody's not going to meet everybody, but you're going to have 4, 5 minutes to meet with your group of people, they can do it in their chat room. And again, thankfully Justin does all the work, and people can participate, and again, they feel like they're engaged in a small group discussion. You as an instructor can enter the small group. That's not as clean in this arrangement but you can go in and say, hey, how's it going? Everybody in this room will know what's happening when you do that. But you can go in and say, hey, everybody, anybody have any questions about what I asked? You're only taking 10 minutes. By the time you get in, get out, it's not worth it. Yes, ma'am.
How is the setting different if we sit instead of walking around?
Oh, it's fine. Justin will figure out, you tell him ahead of time you want to sit, and he will figure out the camera angle so that you are facing probably like this, Justin, so you
Yeah,
look
so
this
what
way.
we can do, right now, the camera is just set where it's automatically moving and zooming based on movement and audio. But I can change it where I can control the camera and I can move it to focus on where you are and have you centered and zoom in. And so I can control it if need be.
Is there a stool
like
to
that,
go
instead of
with the podium?
Is there a stool to go with the podium?
I mean, you can
We
just.
Well, we would just simply use like.
Oh, the podium changes to you.
Right, but
It drops down.
So there is no stool to sit up?
No, you sit on a chair and we drop the podium lower.
But
Right.
I see what you mean,
Yeah.
but if you want to stand, but sometimes put your butt on something, then you'll just kind of nice little break.
You're talking about more like one of the taller wooden stools that.
Yeah.
we-
Yeah, or you can-
I use one teaching all the time, they're great.
So maybe we need to
We can
invest in that.
certainly. You can get
Do we have any?
Okay, this goes back to the 1% at a time, because if somebody on Zoom is trying to listen to, they would hear, "What?"
It does kind of elevate you a little bit as the instructor to.
Yes.
And it's comfortable.
But it's on Zoom.
If this discussion is closed, back up to thumb drives. You want to tell people what format you want on the thumb drives for,
Say that again.
what format you want the thumb drives in? If they're using Macs, they've got to be FAT32 or.
FAT32,
So if your presentation, if you're making it on a Mac, generally, if you copy it onto a thumb drive, it's going to depend on what presenter tool was on your Mac when you made that presentation. I mean, I've seen Mac has their own version almost of like a PowerPoint. Some of them are very easy to convert to a regular PowerPoint. Some are much more difficult, but generally, if you can get me that presentation via email or anything, there's websites that I can use to convert it.
I understand that part.
If
I'm
you
talking
want
about file operating system.
So, yeah,
File operating system,
So just-
not the application.
right, just to answer your question, so the thumb drive that this presentation is on, I did format it as a FAT32.
Okay, that's just important, because otherwise you're
Yes.
gonna walk in, it's gonna say, I can't read
Because
this.
the first time I did it,
And so, second
the
question,
other way.
any problem with us emailing you?
Too big, yeah,
Well, no, I can send them a link from Dropbox.
right.
But belt and suspenders, you've got it, but I've got it, and between the two of us.
That's exactly why we're asking you, and bring your thumb drive to the dry run.
Oh,
So-
and he'll copy it.
And then if he can't get it, then you'll know that the belt or the suspenders have a gap,
Yeah.
and you'll be able to work out any of those issues.
Well, that's the nice thing too. If you bring it the day of, I'll be able to see if there's an issue, what to do. But also, if you bring it the day of and it works just fine, I can copy it right onto this computer for the week, whenever you come in for your dry run, I can copy it to the computer. So that way the next week when you come into your course, it's already there on the computer without even needing to be taken from the device.
But that's an excellent point, and that goes back to why we want the dry runs, why we want it emailed, why we want it on a thumb drive. I mean, just belt, suspenders, and ever popular duct tape.
Email address for Justin, where should we send the presentation?
It's on.
Is it on?
It's on the sheet you were handed,
Yes, it's on here.
the trifold folder.
Yeah, it's on there.
On there.
Okay,
It has all of the emails right here.
Yeah,
Suzanne has it.
key contacts.
Suzanne has them. If you don't have
That's
them,
right.
yeah, just ask Suzanne.
okay. And then I think we have one last slide here, Justin. So we've talked about all kinds of stuff. Something's gonna happen. The microphone's not gonna turn on. Somebody's not gonna be able to hear. There'll be a power surge. Something's gonna happen, and we know that. So just be prepared, but we have taken all of the steps to mitigate those risks by having an email. You have your thumb drive, you've done a dry run, he knows what you're expecting. Justin, if you ask, we'll make suggestions. Like, I would turn it off at this point because you want to bring on discussion. I will put it back on at this point. I've actually cheated and put a question on, which is mine. I have a slide that has the question, and that means ask the question, turn off the slide. So that, like, to your point, you get in the middle of what you're talking about, you forget to
I do that all the time.
turn off the PowerPoint for discussion. Give yourself a note. Do something. Even turn off the presentation. I mean, that's fair. But remember, you've got your two audiences. Today it was harder to demonstrate since we really don't have two audiences, but you do have your two audiences. You're doing your theater in the round, and you're planning and coordinating, and that counts. Having Justin as your backup, and if he knows what you're trying to achieve, he can help you get there, and you'll do just phenomenal. And I'm really looking forward to the classes this semester. I signed up for quite a few of them. Yes, sir.
What did the class participants get the next day?
I actually don't know. Oh, they get a survey. Sometimes you get the survey an hour after the class.
So for courses that are, what we do is we create automated memos that are sent out via email that to yourself and the participants. You'll get a automated email coming to you reminding you in advance prior to the day of the class to remind you, hey, don't forget your class. Then you'll get another memo the morning of your class. Now, if you are teaching, let's say, a three-session class, you'll get an email at 7, it's set to go out at 7 a.m. every morning that you're teaching at 7 a.m. So you'll get, if you're teaching 3 classes, you'll get an email for each of those days. And then after you've taught your class, if your class that involves Zoom, if it was recorded, again, I think 90% usually are. If your content is being recorded, then what we'll do is I'm the person who goes back to it. I take that recording, I edit it for sound, I trim off extra pieces where there was nothing going on, whatever. I trim it up, I make it nice and pretty looking, and then I will send that out to everybody. And we try to do that within 48 hours of your session. That way, if you taught on a Monday, that gives us about 48 hours to get it out to everybody in case they miss your class and they get caught up.
Does anybody have any questions for Doug and I about hybrid teaching and tricks and tools and
I want to know how Doug's talked you into doing all the talking.
She's much more talented than I am.
Judy, thank you so much. I really learned a lot. And the key that I learned is Justin is the key. We need Justin.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. Justin is the key, thinking how you want to do it ahead, and remembering that you've got 2 audiences. Because if you can remember, I have 2 audiences, you will by nature include them. That is the key. But I would ask Justin to remind me that if it appeared like I was wandering off, I'd say, hey, Justin, politely tell me to look at the screen behind me.
Do people ever show up without registering online?
Once in a while. Yeah, once in a while. But from the perspective of running the organization, my goal is to get butts in the chairs. And sometimes someone will come up and say, I forgot, I saw this in the paper and I need to sign up and register. And Justin, after the class, can handle that and take their credit card and enter that in for them.
Some people come in and they say, ready to register, or ready to register.
Right.
We don't really do that.
Well, we can, Justin can.
I just tell them we'll handle that after the class is
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. But before the class, there are a lot of distractions. And that's why it's so good having Justin here, because I've had the joy of trying to teach and run the system. It's very, very difficult, especially if something craps out on you, to use my French.
I do it all the time, and I do it with this class in Peru, and I have an interpreter because I don't speak Spanish, so she's on one channel with my students, I'm on another channel, we're trying to do the international thing, and it's like, you had a question, sir.
Yeah, I hope this is taken the right way. Teach is to learn.
Great way to set up a question.
sarcasm, noise critique. To teach is to learn twice. And then when we teach class as educators, we're trying to enrich someone's life. So we need to stand on a firm foundation and let that be known from the very start. And one of the rules that we all learn in teaching middle school and elementary school kids, never put the kids where you can't see them.
Yeah, but these can't throw spitwads at you.
Oh, yes, he can. He can take and put that one screen on one wall and the other screen on the other wall with students sitting on both sides of the screen. Then you see all your students at one time and you have one class teaching one group of people, not two.
So I have taught that way. I've taught where I had my one screen here and one screen behind me, so the people sitting in the class could see the people behind me, and the people over here could see, I could see them. And that's great, because Lehigh University, they got more money than they know what to do with, and they threw money at the problem, and it worked. I've taught at other universities where I do Justin's job while I'm teaching a 3.5-hour class with undergrad students, me and 11, 20-year-old men. You can imagine what an exciting semester that was. Actually, they were really great. So, yes, it's perfect. If in a perfect world, would you do that? It doesn't work right now. But if you will keep alternating, when you are looking at your slide to see where your point is, just move your gaze.
So
It's not hard to do.
That will work though. That one can go on one wall, go on the other, because really, you can't make technology difficult. It's really simple. That's basically a chalkboard. When you come down to it, that is a chalkboard. It is a better tool. It's the best chalkboard you're ever going to run into. But I'm trying to point out that it would be an easier job for you when you're standing up there teaching a class.
Justin,
Well,
can you put
we do have,
this up?
we do have arrangements for the classroom where things are in different spots, where you can see everything.
Yes, so we
Yeah.
have thought of that problem.
Yeah, and it does, there are some limitations depending on the audio.
Okay,
So-
does anyone have any questions for me about any of the hybrid? My name's not on that information sheet, but Justin knows how to get a hold of me and Lynn knows how to get it.
So this is one way that some instructors teach. They'll have they're not, this is typical of when you're not, it could be hybrid or not. This was not. So they were sharing their presentation. I think, Claudia, you've done this, and Jody, you may have talked about doing this, to make make it easier for the audience to see your presentation. They've got it on both screens, and they're standing in the middle or sitting at a desk in the middle, or making it so that they can move around however they want to. That's one way of doing this, and it actually makes it easy for a large audience to be able to see. And if we go to the next one, this is one, we tested this a couple of days ago where we moved this screen over here. And we did it so that if you're standing here, you're looking at your audience in person, but you're also seeing your people on Zoom. So, and it works. The only thing that's not as quite as clean as I would like is that here you can see a big me and that thumb picture with the camera over there and a little me. So that's the only thing, and we try and make it so that the people at home can see you easily.
Well, one thing that's very beneficial, I think, about having even the stuff that we have here today with the screens being set this way, one thing that we found too that was very helpful is making sure that the whole area near that exit door is clear, because inevitably you're going to have people that go out and use the restroom or whatever, or come in late, and you will have that door open and close at least a few times while you're talking. And at least in my opinion, having that be as far away from everything else going on, it is nice because it's reducing how much of a distraction there is whenever somebody is walking through the aisles, going back to their seat. It just makes it very nice that everybody else is still looking up here and they're not walking in front of other people cutting off their view. And so, that's one benefit with this room layout, at least, to have it this way.
So one thing, can you go back one, please?
I didn't mean to cut you off there, it's just, I knew she was bringing this in.
So one thing you'll notice too is that we've experimented a little bit where the sound system should be. And what we discovered in the process was that people up front can hear you just fine, but the people in the back have difficulty. So when we have a full room, we now have a sound system that can point the sound to the people at the back, so they'll be able to hear easier. Because when that's happening, I'd be mic'd up, and then everyone would be able to hear. So then I'm gonna try, let's just go on to, then there's another way for a more intimate setting where you can have people more in the round. And I think there's one more. Oh yeah. And you can also do a conference table style. And in that case, what you would be doing is you would be centering your conference table where your video output is. And that's how we do our board meetings. So that everyone can, and sometimes we fan it out a little bit, so people are sitting behind a table, but the people who might have to come in through Zoom can then see everybody as they're talking. I think that's the last one.
Basically, we just want to set it up so that you can do what you want to do without worrying about any of this, so that the sound will work, that people will be able to see. And that's what the dry run is for. Justin will get in touch with you. The flyers that I gave everyone, it's got a list of key contacts on it. It's got Justin, it's got Lynn, it's got Jody, it's got me, it's got John.
Jody's on there.
Jody there. In particular, I want you to pay attention to that because I'm not going to be around for a couple of weeks right near the start of the next session. So if you have any questions and you don't hear from me immediately, one of these other people would be the ones to check for those few weeks in September.
And I might mention too that if you can always get in touch with me just by sending an email to info@chesapeakeforum.org, and that always shows up in my email feed. So if you lose my email or somebody else's, just yell for help and I'll make sure that somebody gets it, because I'm never very far away from my computer.
And one more thing, this is the most important thing of all. We want to thank you so much for giving your time and knowledge to Chesapeake Forum. And we want to reward you with a free class or two. If you want to take a class and don't want to pay, you just register using the coupon code instructor, and then the number that is the amount of the class. So instructor in capital letters, and then say 30. It's a $30 class, or, like that. So instructor 30, all one word. That'll get you in for free. Because we're so happy that you're doing this for us.
We are happy about that. And speaking of it, thank you very much for thanking everybody for doing this, because we all have taught classes too, and we know the amount of work that goes into it, and really appreciate your doing that. But I think to John's earlier point that we all love learning. And sometimes we teach classes that we don't really know the answers to. And Claudia, we talked her into talking about Bitcoin. And she said, well, I'm not going to let you record it because I'm not the expert. And she does a great job of researching it and leading a discussion about it. I did want to point out, when we did our survey this semester we had close to 400 people who responded. But I want to make sure that you understand something that was a surprise to us. We used to think that almost everybody were people that moved here, that from here versus come here, that these were all come here's. Well, I'm here to tell you that when we look at how long somebody's been on the Eastern Shore, 34% have been here for 49 years. That means they came here, if you assume that our average age is 65, they came here before they retired and humbly raised a family here. And then we have 9% who have been here for 50 years plus. So we're not all a bunch of people who escaped from California and retired here. But I also would point out that you can expect that 67% of your audience will be women and 32% men. You can expect, especially now that we're doing classes, we have 3 standard slots. We have 10 to 11:30, we have 1 to 2:30, and then we have 5:30 to 7. And we're trying to fit more and more courses into that 5:30 to 7 so that we can attract the people who do have to work and but still want to be able to take some of our classes.
And I believe we have one Saturday class this semester and one Sunday class.
We do. So those crop up. We usually are here in the classroom on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but we kind of this year with Suzanne's puzzle piece of putting all the courses together, we had only 7 slots left over that weren't already filled here in the classroom. That included courses that were happening on Mondays and courses that were happening on Fridays. So we're busting out at the seams. I want to just ask you, how many people do you think have registered for a Chesapeake Forum class so far?
For total or just this semester?
Just so far this week, when we opened up. Bob, how many do you think?
No, I
We saw you
know.
No, we have
500, the president isn't gonna get you the answer.
300.
All right, 300 is low.
550.
550.
550 from The Economist.
The price is right.
You say 500?
430.
430. Who else? Who else has a guess? Come on. Come on, Jen, you can guess.
Have the factual base.
So as of maybe 30 minutes ago, I looked, we have 558 people who have registered.
The economist knocks it out of that park.
Yeah. So
Yeah, Justin, they're all gonna be on at the same time.
yes.
Not different people, they
All
some taking multiple.
Yeah, this is registrations, each individual
Those
registration.
from the 36 courses.
36 courses, yeah. So what we're finding too, and I'm noticing a lot more people signing up for multiple courses. And the next thing that we want to start looking at is how many people stay with us from one semester to the next, and how many you take. We often, some semesters will have a free class. When they take a class for free, do they come back and take another class? So that's, I think, Justin, was there anything else? I mean, gosh, Jody and Doug did a great job of covering the things that can happen. I hate to say it, but shit happens, and you've got to be prepared for that. I have been known to have to start my class and get things rolling while we're still figuring out technology. One thing about the idea of talking to people early beforehand and getting discussions going, which is very important. We always have people that come in late, so they don't get to enjoy that camaraderie in advance. But when you do, and you are ready to start, remember, if you are being recorded, and you're not, but some of us are, make sure that you say, okay, we were ready to get started here. It looks like everyone's here. So take a breath so that Justin has a place to cut and get a clean recording. Always a good idea.
Some sort of an official starting point, it's clear and concise, it's great, because otherwise, we've had instructors who, they'll be having a personal side conversation with someone, they'll take one step to the right, closer to the podium, and then they just start talking.
Yeah.
And you're almost kind of thinking, are they still talking to that person? Or
Well,
did they start?
yeah, a little like the issue that Jody came across, where somebody was already talking, and she was like, am I late? Am I late? What did I miss? So that's a really good practice. I'm sure you do. John?
I'd like to mention that, when your class is over, you are, all faculty members, teachers, receive we like to get feedback. And it's amazing how people who've taught for a long time
and they're so pleased to hear that it went well. I mean, no matter how much experience, and I'm in charge of collecting those and sending the letter to the instructor saying that everything went well, and if there are constructive things, I will do that as well. I also throw out things that people said they just didn't like in class. I mean, that's.
That doesn't help.
It doesn't help, but it's, I enjoy and I'm pleased that feedback comes to me and said, I thought it was going well, but it's nice to know that it's going well. So it's a pleasure.
And we have, we found, when we first started this, Zoom, or no, not Zoom, Coursizio, our registration package, allowed us to send the feedback directly to the instructors as it was coming in. We discovered very quickly that's not a good idea, and mainly because, I would read one thing and go, really? And then I would see somebody else that really liked it, but then what John does is he collects it all and puts it all together so that you see the balance. If there's somebody that didn't, that it's a constructive criticism, but he'll include that and you say, here are some things to think about in the future. And that when you're looking at dribs and drabs, it can be very disheartening sometimes. Bob?
Something else too, we heard from Bob what his key takeaway has been so far from this section. What other key takeaways can we give to the folks that put this meeting together?
Or if anyone has any questions at this point.
Yes.
I think it was absolutely outstanding.
Good job, you guys.
Yes.
Dry run.
Yep.
Checklist.
Yes.
To a certain degree, and essentially, when we do the dry run should include the banter, the break point. Because that's a direct rehearsal between the.
Make sure you do your dry run.
Yeah.
No skipping.
Make
Or I'll
sure
track you down.
you enjoy yourself. Don't get so wrapped up in all of this having to do everything and you forget you're having a good time because it does turn into something that's very fun.
And
we get great people in the classes and it's very entertaining.
what's some other comments what else have you learned that you take away with you?
You didn't know you were signing up for a class, did you?
Yeah, I have these pens that were made that, so then I try to give them away at the farmer's market.
I'd like to make one comment. Sometimes the instructors put way too much on a single screen. So the rule is 5 to 7 bullet points. That's it.
Rule of fives.
Good comment.
There's another little trick that I used to teach the Carnegie course, public speaking. And a lot of times instructors or public speakers say, who has any questions?
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people, they automatically sit on their, especially the younger people, but they sit on their hands. A trick, in some ways, is to do this. Who has the first question? And you just stand there with your hand up until somebody asks the first question.
Somebody
And
says.
eventually that'll break the ice. But if you know at some point, you're reading the audience, you see their body language, you know there's some questions there, but they're a little reluctant. Who has the first question? It always works.
Justin, can you bring up the schedule for next semester? It's a single document.
I do have one more question while he's doing it. I never tended.
Yeah.
I never tended to like to hold questions because in engineering that can just be a pile of junk at the end. But for all of you who are more experienced in doing this sort of thing, do you find sometimes it can get a little bit out of control in terms of staying on track if you allow questions in a hybrid meeting? With people, I can control.
Oh, Zoom, you can control it. They're exactly the same people.
Okay.
You'll say, I'm going to take questions. Those have been great questions, but I want to move on to the rest of the content.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of doing it. And there are times when you'll have to do that, or you may have to, you get the person who likes carrying themselves, and you might have to say, that's a good point, Mr. So-and-so, or whatever,
Let's
and,
take it offline.
yeah.
Right.
Because you know your PowerPoint, you know your presentation, and you need to move on when you need to move on.
I think engaging the audience, the price you pay for maybe losing a few minutes here, there, well worth it. I don't think there's anything more important when you give a presentation than to get the
Yeah.
audience engaged.
Do remember though, these are and Justin, I forgot to check, you programmed these for 1:45, right? So we have, with Zoom, when we first went to hybrid, we would do it 1:30. When it was regular Zoom, you could talk longer and it was fine. Hybrid will turn you off. So what we do instead is we add another 15 minutes, just in case it goes over. So beware. We had a couple of instructors that were used to going over and it was shutting them off. So that's a good thing to remember. Aim for an 1:30.
And if you do go over, just realize there are some people who they plan on it going till a certain time and then they have things to do. So people may start hopping up and start walking out, and it's not them being rude, it's just simply if it's now been, instead of 1.5 hours, it's 1:45, and it seems like it just keeps going, you'll have some people who are kind of like, excuse me, but I gotta go, and then they'll start slipping out the door.
But also, figure out if you really want questions and you really want discussion, plan that in, plant that seed, because you can send your students or participants an email ahead of time or through Justin and say, I want this to be discussion based. We don't want long periods of silence. Bring your questions, bring your thoughts. I've given you advanced material to read. Set them up for success, which sets you up for success by setting your expectations.
I think you just answered the question I had, because when I was originally giving my brief to people that brought me to this, was they said, keep it to this long. Well, you guys want this long. And so I'm thinking, well, I don't want to pad this thing, because then it just gets
No.
too
Oh,
fluffy.
I've had.
So I like your idea, which is come with questions.
Right, you come with questions for them to answer. You feed them the questions ahead of time.
Right.
In class I did, I put out the questions ahead of time. This is what we're gonna discuss. It's literature based,
So literally speaking, we have had classes that have gone over and people in their feedback will say, I really did not like that because I had planned my day around this class and I had to leave. So I missed part of it. So be mindful of people's time, which Suzanne just reminded me to be. One thing here, course proposals for winter due October 16th. And we start planning way in advance. And it seems like we were starting really on top of ourselves here, but it takes time to get these semesters organized and up on the website and everybody going together. So please, I hope that all of you enjoy most of you are new to Chesapeake Forum. I hope you enjoy doing this and start thinking now about what the next thing is that you want to teach and when. We run 3 semesters a year. We have the fall semester that runs from the middle of the first week, basically, of September. It runs into the first week of December this year. We have winter that starts about the middle of January and goes to the end of March. And then we have spring that starts in April and runs to, we try and finish before June because we know that people start doing stuff in June. So, Suzanne. Thank you and John for putting this together. Doug and Jody for all the hard work of this presentation. If you have more questions, grab them and ask.
Right.
Is this for the winter?
This is for the winter.
That's winter.
Yeah, but it says fall. You forgot to change.
She's starting in the fall for the winter.
Yeah.